Imagine being plucked from the dusty plains of the American frontier and thrust into the stars, tasked with an impossible mission that will determine the fate of an entire civilization. This is the extraordinary tale of Jake Thornton, a simple cowboy whose life on Earth ended in tragedy, only to begin anew on a dying alien world light years away. When an advanced extraterrestrial race faces extinction due to a genetic catastrophe that has left them unable to reproduce, they turn to the most unlikely savior, a human with the rugged resilience and genetic diversity they desperately need. What follows is a journey beyond imagination, where a man who once herded cattle across the Texas plains must now become the father of a new hybrid species, navigating alien customs, impossible choices, and the weight of being responsible for the survival of an entire planet. This is a story of sacrifice, adaptation, and what it truly means to be human when everything familiar is stripped away. Join us as we explore this incredible saga of survival, love, and the bridges we build across the cosmos. The year was 1887, and Jake Thornton had never imagined his life would end at 28 years old on a nameless trail between Abilene and Dodge City. The cattle drive had been routine until a Comanche raiding party appeared over the ridge, their war cries splitting the prairie silence like thunder. Jake remembered the chaos, the screaming horses, the thunder of hooves, and then the searing pain as an arrow found its mark between his ribs. He collapsed into the tall grass, watching the sky turn from blue to purple to black, his blood seeping into the Kansas soil that had been his home since birth. But death, as it turned out, was not the end Jake had expected. Instead of darkness or the pearly gates his mother had promised him in Sunday school, Jake opened his eyes to blinding white light and a sensation of weightlessness. His body no longer hurt. In fact, he couldn't feel his body at all. Panic seized him as he tried to move, to scream, to do anything, but he was suspended in nothingness, aware but disconnected from physical form. Then came the voices, not heard through ears but somehow transmitted directly into his consciousness. They spoke in musical tones that seemed to bypass language entirely, communicating pure meaning. Jacob Thornton, your death has been intercepted, your consciousness preserved. Do not be afraid. The words, if they could be called words, washed over him with an otherworldly calm that should have been impossible given his situation. What in God's name is happening to me? Jake's thoughts formed, and somehow they were heard. You have been selected, Jacob Thornton of Earth. Your species has been studied for 347 of your years. We are the Viridians, from a world you cannot see from your planet. We face extinction, and you represent our final hope for survival. Slowly, forms began to materialize in the white void around Jake. Tall, slender beings with skin that seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality, like oil on water, colors shifting from blue to green to purple in the strange light. They had elongated heads, large eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom, and delicate features that were somehow both alien and beautiful. They moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity, their robes flowing as if underwater. I don't understand, Jake's consciousness projected. I'm just a cowboy. I ain't special. I can barely read beyond my own name. One of the beings moved closer, and Jake felt a presence enter his mind, not invasive but gentle, like a guest waiting for permission. Images flooded his awareness, a planet of soaring crystal cities, oceans that gleamed silver under twin suns, forests of trees that grew in spirals toward purple skies. The Viridian world was beautiful beyond description, a paradise of advanced civilization and harmony with nature. But then, the images darkened. The being showed Jake laboratories, scientists working desperately, and the terrible truth. A genetic plague had swept through the Viridian population 2 generations ago. They had defeated the disease itself, but it had left a devastating legacy. The plague had altered their DNA in subtle but catastrophic ways. Viridian women could no longer carry children to term, Every pregnancy ended in failure. The youngest living Viridians were now in their twilight years, and there would be no more. The species was watching its own extinction approach with mathematical certainty. "We have tried everything," the being communicated, and Jake could feel the weight of centuries of desperation in those words. Genetic manipulation, cloning, artificial gestation, all have failed. Our DNA has become too fragile, too specialized. We need an infusion of new genetic material, robust and diverse. We need humanity. But why me? Jake asked, overwhelmed by what he was seeing and hearing. There's millions of humans. Why pick a cowboy who got himself killed on a cattle drive? Your genetic profile is exceptionally diverse, Jacob Thornton. Your ancestry includes European, African, and Native American bloodlines. Your physical conditioning is excellent. Your psychological profile shows adaptability, courage, and a capacity for compassion. But most importantly, your consciousness was available at the moment of death, allowing us to preserve you completely. The technology required to extract a living human would be considered an act of violence by our ethics. We can only take those who have already passed beyond your world's reach. The reality of his situation began to sink in for Jake. He was dead, or at least his body was dead back on that Kansas prairie. His buddies probably buried him already, if the Comanche left enough to bury. His family would mourn him, never knowing what really happened. And these alien beings wanted him to what, exactly? As if reading his thoughts, the Viridian continued, "We ask you to become the father of a new hybrid species, to bond with Viridian women who volunteer for this program. Your human DNA, combined with ours, has shown promise in our simulations. The offspring would be viable, capable of reproduction, carrying forward both our civilizations into the future. You would not be alone in this task. There are others, humans we have preserved from various points in your history, but you would be the first. The pioneer, as your people might say. And if I say no?" Jake wondered, though he couldn't imagine what alternative he had in his current state. "Then we will release your consciousness to whatever lies beyond death in your universe. We will not force you, Jacob Thornton. This must be a choice freely made. But we ask you to consider carefully. You have the power to save an entire civilization from oblivion. Is that not worth a second chance at life, even if that life is beyond anything you have known?" Jake's mind reeled. He thought of his life on Earth, the hard work, the simple pleasures of a campfire under the stars, the satisfaction of a job well done. He thought of Sarah McKinney, the girl he'd been sweet on back in Abilene, who he'd never gotten up the courage to properly court. He thought of his ma and pa, long dead from the fever, and his younger sister Mary, who'd married a shopkeeper in Kansas City. All of that was gone now, whether he went forward with this insane plan or not. If I do this, Jake thought carefully, what happens to me? Do I get a body back? Do I stay floating in this white nothing forever? We will create a new body for you, Jacob, identical to your original form, but healed of all injuries and defects. Enhanced slightly for compatibility with our people and our environment. You will breathe our air, eat our food, walk on our soil. You will live among us, learn our ways, and yes, if you agree, help us create a new generation. The process has been prepared for years, waiting for the right candidate. Jake floated in silence, processing everything. It was impossible, insane, and yet somehow it was happening. He was being given a choice that no human in history had ever faced. Die for real and final, or live again as the savior of an alien race. When he thought about it that way, the answer seemed obvious. How long do I have to decide? He asked. As long as you need, Jacob Thornton. But know that every day that passes, more Viridians lose hope. We are a dying people, watching our world slowly empty. Jake thought about the Comanche warrior who'd shot him, probably thinking he was just killing another white settler encroaching on his land. He thought about all the senseless death he'd seen in his 28 years. The war veterans with missing limbs begging on street corners, children dying from diseases that doctors couldn't cure, women dead in childbirth. Death was everywhere on Earth, random and meaningless. But this chance to prevent death, to create life on a scale beyond imagining, that meant something. All right, Jake decided, feeling a strange peace settle over his consciousness. I'll do it. I'll help your people. God help me. I don't know how a simple cowboy is going to manage any of this, but I'll try. The Viridian beings seemed to pulse with light, and Jake felt waves of gratitude and relief wash over him from their collective consciousness. Thank you, Jacob Thornton. You will be remembered across the ages as the bridge between two worlds. Now, let us begin the process of your restoration. When you wake, you will be reborn on Viridia, under purple skies, ready to start your new life and your sacred mission. The white void began to fade, replaced by a sensation of gentle pulling, of his consciousness being gathered and compressed, shaped and molded into something new yet familiar. Jake Thornton, cowboy of the American West, closed his eyes for the last time as a simple human and opened them to begin his transformation into something far more significant than he ever dreamed possible. Jake's first sensation in his new body was the smell. It wasn't unpleasant, just profoundly alien, a mixture of something like cinnamon and ozone, with undertones of vegetation he couldn't name. He opened his eyes slowly, afraid of what he might see, and found himself lying on a surface that seemed to mold perfectly to his body, neither hard nor soft, but somehow both at once. The room around him glowed with a soft bioluminescence, the walls themselves emanating gentle light and shifting patterns that reminded him of auroras he'd once seen on a winter night in Montana. He sat up, and his body responded perfectly. Jake looked down at his hands, turning them over in wonder. They were his hands exactly as he remembered them, the scar on his right thumb from a knife that had slipped while he was skinning a rabbit, the calluses from years of rope work, even the slightly crooked pinky finger he'd broken as a boy, and that had never quite set right. But the arrow wound in his side was gone, and he felt stronger than he could ever remember feeling, like every muscle in his body had been tuned to perfection. Jacob Thornton, you are awake. This is good. The voice came from a Viridian who appeared in the doorway, their form more solid now than the ethereal beings he'd encountered in the void. This one wore robes of deep blue that seemed to flow like water, and their large eyes regarded him with what he interpreted as kindness. Where am I? Jake asked, and was startled to hear his own voice, rough and human, cutting through the musical quality of the ambient sounds around him. You are in the Restoration Center in the city of Luminar on the continent of Ethermere. You are on Viridia now, Jacob. Your journey across the stars is complete. I am Counselor Genitara, and I have been assigned as your cultural liaison and guide during your transition period. Jake swung his legs off the bed and stood, testing his balance. Everything felt right, better than right, actually. How long was I out? The restoration process required 17 of your hours. Your consciousness had to be fully integrated with your new physical form, and we had to ensure all biological systems were functioning properly. How do you feel? I feel good. Real good, actually. Better than I did before I got shot. Jake walked to what he assumed was a window, though it seemed to be made of some crystalline material that shifted from transparent to opaque and back again. Through it, he saw the alien landscape that would be his new home. The city of Luminara stretched out before him like something from a fever dream. Towers of crystal and some kind of white stone spiraled into the purple sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float without any visible support. Gardens grew everywhere, not just on the ground, but climbing up the sides of buildings, hanging from suspended platforms, creating layers of green and gold and colors that didn't have names in English. In the distance, Jake could see the twin suns setting over what looked like an ocean, painting the sky in shades of violet, crimson, and a color somewhere between blue and silver that hurt his eyes if he looked at it too long. "It's beautiful," Jake breathed, and he meant it. "Like nothing I ever imagined." "Viridia was once the crown jewel of this sector of the galaxy," Janatara said, moving to stand beside him. "Our civilization has existed for over 30,000 of your years. We have explored 17 other star systems, made contact with 12 sentient species, created art and science beyond measure. And now we watch it all slowly die. The youngest Viridian you will meet is 63 of your years old. Our schools are empty. Our nurseries stand silent. We are the last generation, Jacob, unless you and the others can help us." The weight of responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders like a physical thing. "You mentioned others. Other humans you've brought here?" "Yes. Over the past 5 of your years, we have preserved and restored 17 humans from various periods of your history. They are scattered across Viridia, working with different communities on the repopulation program. You will meet some of them in time. But first, you must undergo orientation and cultural training. You need to understand our ways, our customs, our biology, before you can truly begin your mission." Jake turned away from the window to face Janatara fully. The Viridians stood nearly 7 feet tall, their elongated form both fragile-looking and somehow elegant. "I got a lot of questions," Jake admitted. "Starting with how exactly this repopulation thing is supposed to work. I mean, we're different species. How is that even possible?" Janatara made a gesture that Jake somehow understood as the equivalent of a smile. "A valid concern. Please, sit. I will explain everything." They moved to what Jake supposed was furniture, though it seemed to grow out of the floor and adjusted itself to accommodate his human frame. Janatara settled across from him with that liquid grace all the Viridians seemed to possess. "The genetic plague that devastated us did not destroy our fertility entirely," Janatara began. "What it did was make Viridian to Viridian reproduction impossible. The genetic codes no longer align properly. The embryos cannot develop. But our scientists discovered something remarkable. Human DNA is compatible with ours in ways we never anticipated. Your species is younger than ours in evolutionary terms, more robust, more adaptable. When human genetic material is combined with Viridian, the resulting hybrid is viable, healthy, and capable of reproduction. So the children, they'd be half human, half Viridian?" Jake asked, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. "In a sense, yes. They will carry traits from both species. We cannot predict exactly what they will look like or how they will develop, as this is unprecedented in our history. But our simulations show strong probability of success. The first generation of hybrids will be able to reproduce with each other, or with pure Viridians, or even with humans, should we preserve more of your people. The genetic diversity will ensure the survival of Viridian culture, knowledge, and civilization." Jake rubbed his face, feeling the familiar stubble there. Some things stayed the same, even across the stars. "And how do you expect this to work? I'm supposed to just, meet these Viridian women and have children with them?" "That seems like a hell of a thing to ask." "It is a tremendous thing to ask," Janatara agreed solemnly. "Which is why participation is entirely voluntary on both sides. Viridian women who wish to participate in the program have been counseled extensively. They understand what it means to carry a hybrid child, to bond with a human. Many have volunteered, Jacob. They see it as their sacred duty to save our species. But they also understand this is not merely a biological transaction. There must be genuine connection, understanding, perhaps even affection between you and your partners." "Partners, plural," Jake noted dryly. "Yes. To achieve genetic diversity and maximize the chances of success, the program requires each human participant to bond with multiple Viridian volunteers. We understand this may conflict with some human cultural norms regarding monogamy, but the survival of our species must take precedence." Jake stood and walked back to the window, his mind racing. In his time, a man having children with multiple women outside of marriage would be scandalous, grounds for being run out of town. But this wasn't his time anymore, and this sure as hell wasn't Kansas. These people were desperate, facing extinction, and somehow he held part of the solution in his very DNA. How many? He asked quietly. How many women are we talking about? That is entirely up to you and your partners. Some of the other humans have bonded with 3 or 4 Viridians. Others have taken a different approach, forming a single deep bond with one volunteer. Both methods have produced results. The key is genuine willingness and emotional connection, not merely biological compatibility. Jake turned back to face Shenatara. And what happens to me after? Say this works, and we create these hybrid children. What's my life going to be like here? You will be honored, certainly, provided for, given every comfort our civilization can offer. But more than that, Jacob, you will be a citizen of Viridia, free to pursue whatever life you choose to build here. We have much to teach you, and perhaps much to learn from you as well. Some of the other humans have become teachers, sharing Earth's history and culture with us. Others have chosen to learn our sciences, our arts. One has become a remarkable musician, blending human and Viridian musical traditions in ways we never imagined possible. And I can never go back to Earth, Jake said, though it wasn't really a question. Your Earth body is gone, Jacob, and the temporal displacement would be severe even if return were possible. The technology required to bring you here involved bending time as well as space. Your Earth is nearly a century ahead of the moment you left it. Everyone you knew is long dead. I'm sorry for this loss. Jake felt the full weight of that reality hit him. He'd known intellectually that he was dead on Earth, that his old life was over, but hearing it stated so plainly made it undeniably real. Sarah McKinney had lived her whole life, probably married someone else, had children and grandchildren, and died of old age, all while Jake was traveling across the stars. His sister Mary, the little girl who used to follow him around the farm, was gone too. I need some time, Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. To process all this, it's a lot. Of course. Take all the time you need. Your quarters are yours for as long as you require. When you are ready to continue your orientation, simply touch the crystal panel by the door and I will return. In the meantime, there is a device on the table that will provide any food or drink you desire. Simply speak what you want and it will be created. The nourishment will be suited to human metabolism. Janitar moved toward the door with that fluid grace, then paused. Jacob Thornton, I know this is overwhelming. I know you have been asked to bear a burden no human should have to carry. But please know that you are not alone in this. We will support you in every way possible. You have given us hope when we had none. For that, you have our eternal gratitude. After Janatara left, Jake stood alone in his alien room, looking out at the purple sky and the strange, beautiful city beyond. He thought about all the cowboys he'd known, rough men who lived simple lives driving cattle and sleeping under the stars. What would they think if they could see him now? What would his pa say? But he knew what his pa would say. The old man had always taught him that when life gave you a job to do, you did it to the best of your ability, no matter how hard it was. And this job, impossible and overwhelming as it seemed, was the most important thing Jake would ever do. He was going to save a civilization. He was going to create life across the stars. Jake Thornton, cowboy and unlikely savior, watched the twin suns set on his first day on Viridia and made a silent promise to himself that he would see this through, no matter what it cost him. He had been given a second chance at life with a purpose beyond anything he'd ever imagined. He wasn't going to waste it. 3 months into his new life on Viridia, Jake had settled into a routine that would have been unimaginable to the simple cowboy he'd once been. His days were filled with cultural lessons, language training. The Viridians had implanted a translation, device in his neural cortex that allowed him to understand their language, though he insisted on learning it naturally as well, and physical conditioning to adapt to Viridia's slightly lower gravity and higher oxygen content. He'd met several of the other humans, a fascinating collection, including a Roman centurion named Marcus, a Chinese physician from the Tang dynasty named Li Wei, and a Victorian Englishwoman named Catherine, who died in childbirth and now worked as a teacher in one of Viridia's learning centers. But despite all the distractions and new experiences, Jake couldn't escape the central purpose of his presence on Viridia. He was approaching the time when he would meet the first Viridian woman who had volunteered to participate in the repopulation program. "You seem anxious," Janitar observed during one of their daily sessions. They were in a meditation garden suspended high above the city, surrounded by plants that swayed to music only they could hear. "This is natural." All of the humans experienced trepidation before their first bonding. "It's not that I'm scared exactly," Jake tried to explain, watching a fountain of liquid that somehow defied gravity, flowing upward before dispersing into mist. "It's just that where I come from, there's a certain way these things are done. Courting, marriage, children. And this feels like I'm skipping all of that, jumping straight to the end without the middle parts that make it mean something. Perhaps that is why we encourage genuine connection first," Janitara suggested. "You will have time to know your potential partners before any bonding occurs. In fact, I believe you are ready to begin that process. There is someone I would like you to meet." Jake's heart rate picked up, and he was annoyed that the Viridian probably could sense his physiological response through whatever technology they had monitoring him. Now? Just like that? Is there ever a perfect moment for such things? Janitara made that gesture that meant amusement. "Come, Jacob. She has been waiting for this meeting as anxiously as you have." They walked through the floating gardens to a pavilion at the edge of the platform. There, standing with her back to them as she looked out over the city, was a Viridian woman. She wore robes of deep green that complemented her iridescent skin, which seemed to shimmer with undertones of gold in the light of the twin suns. When she turned at their approach, Jake found himself staring into the largest, most expressive eyes he'd ever seen, even among the Viridians. They were the color of amethyst and seemed to hold depths of emotion that translated across species. "Jacob Thornton." Janitara made formal introductions. "This is Lyshan, xenobiologist and cultural historian. Lyshan, this is Jacob, whom you have been waiting to meet." "Hello," Jake managed, suddenly feeling like an awkward teenager rather than a 28-year-old man. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ma." Lyshan made a sound that the translator rendered his laughter musical and genuine. "Ma'am? Janitara, you did not tell me he was charming. Please, Jacob, call me Lyra. The formal names are for ceremonies and government functions. Among friends, we use the shortened forms. Then call me Jake," he responded, relaxing slightly at her easy manner. "Nobody ever called me Jacob except my mother when I was in trouble. I will leave you two to talk," Janitara announced, retreating with that liquid grace. "Jake, you know how to return to your quarters. Lyra, thank you for your patience." And then they were alone, human and alien, standing in a garden suspended above an impossible city under a purple sky. For a long moment, neither spoke. Jake studied Lyra, trying not to stare but unable to help himself. She was taller than him by several inches, her form more delicate than any human woman he'd known. But there was something in the way she carried herself that suggested strength beneath the elegant exterior. "I imagine this is very strange for you," Lyra said finally, moving to sit on a bench that grew from the floor of the pavilion. She patted the space beside her in a gesture that was surprisingly human. "Meeting someone who might become your partner in the most intimate way possible, yet knowing nothing about each other except our biological compatibility." Jake sat down, keeping a respectful distance. "It's not how things are done where I come from, that's for sure. But then again, nothing about this situation is normal by any standard I know. Tell me about where you come from." Lyra requested, turning those amethyst eyes on him with genuine interest. I have studied Earth from our records, but they are clinical, scientific. I want to know what it was like for you, living there. What you loved, what you dreamed about before you came here. Something about her directness and obvious sincere interest made Jake want to talk. He found himself describing the Kansas plains, the endless sky, the satisfaction of hard work and simple living. He told her about the cattle drives, the camaraderie of the men he'd worked with, the beauty of a campfire under the stars. He even told her about Sarah McKinney, the girl he'd never gotten up the courage to court properly. Lyra listened with an intensity that was flattering and slightly unnerving. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. It sounds lonely in some ways, hard, but also beautiful. Simple in a way that Viridia has not been for thousands of years. We have gained so much through our advancement, but perhaps we have lost that connection to the basic elements of existence that you describe. What about you? Jake asked. What was your life like before all this? Before the plague and the repopulation program? Lyra's expression shifted to something Jake interpreted as sadness. I was a researcher, studying the biology of other species we had encountered in our explorations. I loved my work, the discovery of new life forms, the understanding of how different worlds produce different solutions to the puzzle of existence. I was supposed to have children of my own with my bonded partner, Kelfan. We had planned our family, chosen names, designed the nursery in our home. She paused, and Jake could see the pain in her eyes. When the plague's effects became apparent, Keltham was one of the first to volunteer for the genetic trials. He underwent procedure after procedure, trying to find a way to make Viridian reproduction viable again. The final treatment killed him. The therapy was too aggressive, and his body could not withstand it. He died believing he had failed, believing our species was doomed. I'm sorry, Jake said quietly, meaning it. That's a hell of a loss. It was the loss that broke me for a time, Lyra admitted. But it also made me determined. When I heard about the human program, about the possibility of creating hybrid children who could carry our civilization forward, I knew I had to volunteer. Not just for myself, but for Kelvin. To honor his sacrifice by ensuring that Viridian culture, knowledge, and beauty does not vanish from the universe. Jake felt a surge of respect for this alien woman. She wasn't approaching this program out of desperation or duty alone, but out of love for someone she'd lost and determination to give meaning to that loss. That was something he could understand. I need to be honest with you, Lyra, Jake said, turning to face her fully. I don't know if I can be what you need. I'm just a cowboy who got lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to die at the right moment and get chosen for this. I'm not educated like you are. I don't understand half the science behind what we're supposed to do here. Hell, I can barely wrap my mind around the fact that I am sitting on a floating garden on an alien planet, talking to a woman who's not even human. Lyra reached out and placed her hand on his, and Jake was startled by the warmth of her touch. Her skin was smoother than any human's, but the gesture was universal. Jake, education and understanding of science are not what we need from you. We need your humanity, your genetic diversity, yes, but more than that, we need your willingness to try, to bridge the gap between our species with compassion and genuine effort. Can you do that? Jake looked down at their hands, alien and human, touching in a way that somehow felt natural despite everything. I can try. That's all I know how to promise. I'll give this my best shot, same as I would any job I took on. Then that is enough, Lyra said, and Jake heard the relief in her voice. We do not expect miracles, Jake. We expect honest effort and genuine connection. Let us start there and see where it leads. They talked for hours in that pavilion, as the twin suns moved across the purple sky and the city of Luminara lit up with its bioluminescent glow below them. Jake learned that Lyra loved music, particularly the complex harmonic compositions that Viridians created using instruments that responded to thought rather than touch. She learned that Jake could play harmonica badly and had once dreamed of learning guitar if he ever saved enough money for one. They discovered they both enjoyed the quiet contemplation of nature, though what constituted nature was vastly different in their experiences. As the evening deepened, Jake felt something unexpected: hope. Not just hope that the repopulation program would work, but hope that he might actually build something like a real life here on Viridia. That the connection between him and Lyra might be genuine, not just a biological necessity. "I would like to see you again," Lyra said as they prepared to part. "Not for the program, not yet. Just to talk more, to continue learning about each other. Would that be acceptable?" "I'd like that," Jake agreed. "More than acceptable. It'd be my pleasure, actually. Then tomorrow, if you are willing, I would show you the archive of memories. It is where we keep the recorded history of our species, the art and music and literature of 30,000 years. I think you would find it beautiful, and it would help you understand what we are fighting to preserve." As Jake made his way back to his quarters that night, he realized something had shifted within him. He'd approached this whole situation as a duty, a job he'd been assigned by fate and circumstance. But meeting Lyra had made it personal. She wasn't just a representative of a dying species. She was a woman who had loved and lost, who was brave enough to try again in the most unconventional way possible. If he could help give her hope, help her honor the memory of the partner she'd lost, then maybe this crazy mission of his had meaning beyond simple biological function. Jake looked up at the unfamiliar stars above Viridia and wondered what the future held. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, he felt like he might actually belong here. That he might actually be able to do what they'd asked of him, not just physically, but emotionally. Tomorrow he would learn more about Viridian history. Tomorrow he would spend more time with Lyra. And somewhere beyond tomorrow, if fate and biology cooperated, they might actually create something new together. A child who was both human and Viridian, a living bridge between two civilizations, and hope for a species teetering on the edge of extinction. The archive of memories turned out to be more than a repository of information. It was a cathedral of crystalline structures that somehow recorded and projected the entire sensory experience of moments from Viridian history. As Lyra guided Jake through the vast halls, he didn't just see historical events, he experienced them, feeling the emotions of long-dead Viridians as they made first contact with alien species, created masterworks of art, fell in love, raised children, celebrated victories, and mourned losses. "This is overwhelming," Jake admitted after witnessing a recording of a Viridian family from 10,000 years ago welcoming their first child. He'd felt the joy of the parents, the wonder of the moment, so intensely that tears had formed in his eyes. "It's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. It is the weight of everything we stand to lose," Lyra said softly. "Every memory in this archive, every moment of joy and sorrow, every achievement and failure, all of it disappears if we cannot find a way to continue. Our species does not believe in an afterlife the way some of Earth's religions do. For us, what we leave behind in memory and in our children is our immortality. Without children, we have only memories, and memories fade when there is no one left to share them." They moved through sections of the archive that showed the plague years, and Jake experienced a growing horror as Viridians realized what was happening to their species. He felt the desperation of scientists working around the clock, the grief of families who would never expand, the slow dawning realization that extinction was not just a possibility, but a probability. "Kelthon is here," Lyra said, leading Jake to a smaller alcove. Before he died, he recorded his memories for the archive. Would you like to experience them? To understand who he was? It was a strange offer, and Jake wasn't sure how he felt about essentially stepping into the shoes of the man who had been Lyra as bonded partner. But something about her expression, the vulnerability there, made him agree. The memories that washed over Jake were intense and intimate. Kelvin had been a geneticist, brilliant and dedicated, with a dry sense of humor and a deep love for Lyra that colored everything he did. Jake experienced their bonding ceremony, felt the overwhelming joy of their connection. He experienced Kelvin's growing determination to fix the plague's effects, and the crushing weight of failure after failure. Finally, he experienced Kelvin's last thoughts before the final treatment that would kill him. Hope that his sacrifice might somehow lead to answers, and a wish that Lyra would find a way to be happy again. When the memory ended, Jake found himself shaking. That was intense. I've never felt anything like that. Few humans have experienced Viridian memory recordings, Lyra explained. Your brain chemistry is different from ours, so the experience may be even more vivid for you than it is for us. I wanted you to know Kelvin, to understand what we are fighting for. Not just abstract survival, but the continuation of love, of connection, of everything that makes existence meaningful. Jake nodded slowly, still processing the intensity of what he'd just experienced. He loved you very much, and he wanted you to move forward, to find happiness again. I felt that in his last thoughts. Yes. Lyra's voice was thick with emotion. Which is why I can stand here with you now, without feeling I am betraying his memory. He would want this. He would want our people to survive, even if it means I must bond with someone from another world entirely. Over the following weeks, Jake and Lyra spent increasing amounts of time together. She showed him the wonders of Viridia, the living gardens that responded to emotions, the concert halls where music could be seen as well as heard, the meditation pools that allowed shared consciousness between individuals. He taught her about Earth, sharing stories of human history, playing her the few songs he could remember on a harmonica that the Viridians had synthesized for him, even teaching her a simple dance his mother had taught him as a child. Their relationship deepened in ways Jake hadn't anticipated. What had started as a biological necessity was becoming something more genuine. He found himself thinking about Lyra when they were apart, looking forward to their meetings with an anticipation that had nothing to do with duty. And he could see the same shift happening in her. The way her colors brightened when he arrived, the musical quality of her laughter when he said something that amused her. But beneath the growing connection was an undercurrent of tension. They both knew what was expected, what the ultimate purpose of their relationship was supposed to be. The other humans Jake had spoken with had warned him about this phase, the awkwardness of transitioning from companionship to something more intimate when the stakes were so impossibly high. It was Catherine, the Victorian woman, who gave him the most practical advice. Stop thinking of it as a transaction or a mission, she told him over tea in her quarters. Think of it as what it actually is. Two people who care for each other choosing to create a family together. Yes, the circumstances are extraordinary, but the fundamentals are the same. You're not just providing genetic material, Jake. You're going to be a father. That child will need you, not just your DNA. The weight of that realization hit Jake harder than he'd expected. He'd been so focused on the abstract concept of saving a species that he hadn't fully considered the concrete reality of being a parent. These weren't going to be theoretical hybrid children. They were going to be real kids who would need raising, teaching, loving. And he had no idea how to be a father, especially to children who were half alien. You're overthinking this, Marcus the Roman told him during a training session where the former Centaurian was teaching Jake Viridian combat techniques. I have 3 hybrid children now with 2 different Viridian partners. They are strange, these children, not quite human and not quite Viridian, but they are also wonderful. Smart, curious, capable of love. When my daughter Aria calls me father in her mixed accent, part Latin and part Viridian, I feel pride that no military victory ever gave me. It was Lei Wei, the Chinese physician, who provided the most sobering perspective. The first births were difficult, he admitted, as they walked through one of Luminara's medical facilities. The hybrid biology is unpredictable. Some children are born more human, others more viridian. We have lost some to complications we could not foresee. But we learn from each tragedy, and the success rate improves. You must understand, Jake, that this path will not be easy. There will be joy, yes, but there will also be pain and loss. That is the nature of creation. Armed with the perspectives of his fellow humans and the growing depth of his connection with Lyra, Jake finally felt ready to move forward. The decision was made not in some formal ceremony, but during a quiet evening in Lyra's quarters, as they sat watching the twin suns set over the silver ocean visible from her windows. "I'm ready," Jake said simply, "if you are. To really commit to this, to try to create a family together." Lyra turned to him, her amethyst eyes searching his face. "You are certain?" "This is not a decision to be made lightly, Jake. Once we begin this process, you will be bound to any child we create in ways that go beyond biology. In Viridian culture, the bond between parent and child is sacred, unbreakable. Even if we do not continue as partners, you will always be their father." "I understand," Jake assured her. "And I want this. Not just because it's what I was brought here to do, but because I've come to care about you, about your people, about what we might build together. I want to be a part of saving Viridia, and I want to do it with you." What followed was a bonding ceremony that blended Viridian tradition with adaptations for human participation. The other humans and several of Lyra's closest companions attended as witnesses. Genitara presided over the ritual, which involved the sharing of memories through the neural interface technology, allowing Jake and Lyra to experience key moments from each other's lives in a way that created deep understanding and empathy. Jake experienced Lyra's childhood in the crystal towers of Luminara, her first breakthrough in xenobiological research, the joy of bonding with Kelvin, and the crushing grief of his loss. Lyra experienced Jake's frontier upbringing, the wide-open spaces of the Kansas plains, the camaraderie of the cattle drives, and the pain of his own death. When the memory sharing ended, they were not two strangers from different worlds, but two individuals who had genuinely come to know and understand each other at a fundamental level. The physical bonding that followed was both strange and natural, awkward and beautiful. The Viridian physicians have prepared them both, explaining the biological mechanisms involved. But no amount of scientific explanation could fully prepare Jake for the reality of intimacy across species lines. Yet somehow, in the quiet of Lyra's quarters, with bioluminescent light patterns playing across the walls, they found a connection that transcended the alien nature of their pairing. In the weeks that followed, Jake experienced a happiness he hadn't known since before his death. He continued his cultural studies and his work with the other humans. But now he had something more, a genuine relationship with Lyra that was growing deeper each day. They began making plans for the future, discussing how they would raise their child if the bonding proved successful, what values they wanted to instill, what kind of world they hoped to help create for the next generation. 2 months after their bonding ceremony, Lyra confirmed what they had been hoping for. She was pregnant. The Viridian physicians monitored her constantly, comparing her progress to the other successful hybrid pregnancies, making adjustments to ensure the best chance of a healthy birth. But despite their attention and care, complications arose in the 4th month. Jake was in a language lesson when Genitara appeared at the door, their expression grave. "You need to come to the medical facility immediately. Lyra has been admitted. There are complications with the pregnancy." The walk to the medical facility was the longest of Jake's life, even though it only took minutes. He found Lyra in a treatment chamber, surrounded by Viridian physicians whose colors had shifted to darker, more somber tones. She was conscious, but clearly in pain, her iridescent skin pale and her breathing labored. "What's happening?" Jake demanded, moving to her side and taking her hand. "The fetus is developing incorrectly," one of the physicians explained. The human and Viridian DNA are not integrating as they should. There is a conflict at the cellular level that is causing systemic failure in both the child and Lyra. If we do nothing, we will lose them both. We have two options. We can attempt an experimental treatment that might correct the cellular conflict, but it carries significant risk to both mother and child. Or we can terminate the pregnancy now to save Lyra with certainty. Jake looked at Lyra, seeing the pain and fear in her eyes, but also seeing the determination there. "What do you want to do?" he asked her quietly. "Try the treatment," Lyra said without hesitation. "I will not lose this child without fighting for them. Kelthon died trying to save our species. I can be no less brave. The treatment could kill you both," the physician warned. "Then at least we tried," Lyra insisted. "Jake, please. Support my decision in this." Jake felt torn apart. Every instinct told him to protect Lyra, to choose the option that would guarantee her survival. But he also understood her need to fight, to take the risk for the sake of the child they had created together and for the future of her species. This was what she had volunteered for, what she had committed to when she entered the repopulation program. "Do the treatment," Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. "But you better both make it through this, you hear me? I didn't come all the way across the damn galaxy to lose you now." Lyra squeezed his hand, and Jake felt the warmth of her gratitude through their neural link. "I will fight, Jake, for our child, for our people, for the future we dreamed of together. I promise I will fight." The physicians began the treatment immediately, a complex procedure involving genetic manipulation at the cellular level and technology that Jake couldn't begin to understand. All he could do was stand by helplessly holding Lyra's hand and pray to whatever gods might listen across the vast distances of space that the woman he had come to love and the child they had created together would survive. 3 years passed on Viridia, years that transformed Jake from a lost cowboy into something he never expected, a cornerstone of a new civilization. Arielyn grew into a precocious child whose abilities continued to amaze everyone around her. She could communicate in both English and Viridian before her second birthday, could form neural connections with multiple individuals simultaneously, and showed an intuitive understanding of both human and Viridian culture that suggested her hybrid nature gave her insights neither parent species could achieve alone. Kessa and Van had both given birth to healthy hybrid children. Kessa's son Kaiden, who showed remarkable musical abilities that blended human rhythm with Viridian harmonic understanding, and Ven's daughter, Sarah May, who displayed an analytical mind that combined human creative problem-solving with Viridian logical precision. Jake found himself the proud father of 3 extraordinary children, each unique, each beautiful, each a living bridge between worlds. The repopulation program across Viridia had produced over 200 hybrid children in those 3 years, with more births happening regularly. The Viridian people, who had been facing extinction with grim resignation, now moved through their cities with renewed hope. Nurseries that had stood empty for decades were filled with the sounds of children again. Schools were redesigning their curricula to accommodate the unique needs and abilities of hybrid students. The entire civilization was transforming, adapting to incorporate humanity into their culture. But success brought new challenges. As the hybrid children grew, questions arose about their place in Viridian society. Were they Viridian? Human? Something else entirely? Some traditionalist Viridians argued that the hybrids, while necessary for survival, represented a dilution of pure Viridian culture. Some of the human fathers worried that their children would face discrimination or identity crises as they grew older. A council was formed to address these concerns, consisting of Viridian elders, human representatives, and, interestingly, some of the hybrid children themselves, who had developed rapidly enough to participate meaningfully in discussions about their own future. Arielyn, at only 3 years old, but with cognitive abilities far exceeding a human or Viridian child of that age, was among those invited to share her perspective. "I am not Viridian," Ariel said in the council chamber, her small voice carrying clearly through the neural amplification system. "I am not human. I am both and neither. I am bridge, like Papa says. Why does that have to be less? Why can it not be more?" Her simple question, posed with the clarity only a child could muster, shifted the entire debate. What if the hybrid children were not a compromise, but an evolution? Not a loss of purity, but a gain in diversity and capability? The council began to reframe the conversation from one of preserving Viridian culture despite the hybrids to one of embracing a new, expanded culture that incorporated the best of both civilizations. Jake watched these developments with a mixture of pride and concern. He was proud of what the hybrids were achieving, proud of his children and their remarkable abilities. But he worried about the weight of expectation being placed on such young shoulders. These children were being asked to be nothing less than the saviors and architects of an entire civilization's future. "They are strong," Lyra assured him when he expressed these concerns. "Stronger than either of our species alone. That is the gift of hybrid vigor, Jake. Not just physical strength, but mental and emotional resilience. They can bear this weight, especially if we support them properly." The human fathers met regularly to discuss their experiences and challenges. Marcus spoke about the strange experience of watching his children develop abilities he could never have, creating a gap between parent and child that was difficult to bridge. Li Wei discussed the medical challenges, as some hybrids showed health issues that were difficult to treat because they were neither fully human nor fully Viridian. Catherine talked about the educational puzzles, trying to teach children who learned differently than either parent species. But despite the challenges, all agreed that the experiment had been worth it. They had given Viridia a future, and in return, they had been given lives with purpose and meaning far beyond what any of them had experienced on Earth. On Arielin's 4th birthday, celebrated according to both Viridian and human traditions, Jake organized a gathering of all the hybrid children and their families. Over 50 children attended, ranging from newborns to Arielin's age, representing the first generation of a new people. Watching them play together, communicating through a mixture of spoken language and neural connections that no pure human or Viridian could fully participate in, Jake realized he was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. "They will surpass us," Genitara observed, standing beside Jake as they watched the children. "Both our species. They have the best traits of human adaptability and Viridian advancement. In a few generations, they will have created a civilization that combines the achievements of 30,000 years of Viridian progress with the dynamic innovation of humanity. We are not saving Viridian civilization, Jake. We are transforming it into something new and potentially greater. Does that scare you?" Jake asked. "That your people won't exist in their pure form anymore?" Genitara was silent for a long moment before answering. "At first, yes. Many Viridians grieve for what we are losing. But I have come to see it differently. We are not ending. We are evolving. Every Viridian trait, every piece of knowledge, every cultural achievement will be passed down through these children. And it will be enhanced, expanded, made richer by the human elements. That is not death. That is transformation, perhaps even transcendence." As the party continued, with hybrid children demonstrating abilities that amazed their parents and each other, Jake found himself pulled aside by his 3 children. Ariel, Caden, and Sarah May held hands, forming a neural connection that included Jake through his link with Ariel. Through the connection, they showed him something they had been working on together, a vision of Viridia's future. They showed him cities where human and Viridian architecture blended seamlessly, schools where children learned to embrace both aspects of their heritage spacecraft that would carry the hybrid people to explore the galaxy with combined human curiosity and Viridian wisdom. They showed him a future where humanity and Viridia were not separate, but united in a new civilization that honored both. Is this what you want? Jake asked his children through the neural link. To build this future? It is what we are building, Papa, Arielyn responded, and Jake could feel the certainty in her thought. We and all the bridge children. We do not have to choose between human and Viridian. We are making something new that is better than either alone. Tears streamed down Jake's face as he experienced his children's vision. He thought about the simple cowboy he'd been, riding across the Kansas plains with no greater ambition than to save enough money for a small ranch of his own. He'd been plucked from that life at the moment of death and given an impossible mission: save an alien civilization from extinction. But what he'd actually done was so much more than that. He hadn't just saved the Viridians. He'd helped to create an entirely new people who would carry the best of two worlds into the future. His children, and all the hybrid children, were not just the salvation of Viridia. They were the next step in the evolution of two civilizations, a fusion that would ultimately benefit both. Later that night, after the party had ended and the children were asleep, Jake stood on the balcony of the quarters he shared with Lyra, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. Somewhere out there, and possibly far away, was Earth. His old home, where everyone he'd ever known was long dead, where the world had moved on nearly a century past the moment of his death. He felt no regret. How could he, when he looked at what he built here? He had 3 incredible children who were literally making history with every breath they took. He had partners who respected and cared for him, even if their relationships were not quite like human marriages. He had purpose and meaning and a legacy that would echo through centuries. "What are you thinking about?" Lyra asked, joining him on the balcony. She'd learned to read his moods even without the neural link, understanding the man she'd bonded with on levels both technological and simply human. "I'm thinking about bridges," Jake said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Arielyn calls herself a bridge, and all the hybrid children are bridges between our peoples. But I'm a bridge too, aren't I? Between the Earth that was and the Viridia that will be. Between human and Viridian. Between the past and the future." "You are the first bridge," Lyra agreed. "Without you, none of this would have been possible. You took a chance on us, on me, when you could have simply let yourself die and move on to whatever comes after. You chose to live, to try, to build something new despite how strange and frightening it must have been." "I had had help," Jake said with a smile. A certain beautiful xenobiologist who was brave enough to trust a cowboy from the past with the future of her entire species. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as Viridia's twin moons rose over the silver ocean. Inside, their daughter slept, dreaming dreams that were both human and Viridian, processing a world that was hers in ways it could never be fully theirs. In the years that followed, the transformation of Viridia continued. The hybrid children grew and developed, each generation showing more remarkable abilities than the last. Second-generation hybrids, the children of hybrid parents, showed even greater synthesis of human and Viridian traits, along with entirely new capabilities that neither parent species had possessed. Jake grew older, though slowly, as the Viridian medical technology extended his lifespan far beyond normal human limits. He watched his children grow into leaders of their people, watched his grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across Viridia and eventually to other worlds as the hybrid civilization began to explore the galaxy with renewed vigor. He never forgot Earth, never forgot the Kansas plains where he died that fateful day in 1887. He told stories to his descendants about humanity, about cowboys and cattle drives, about the simple beauty of a campfire under an open sky. Those stories became part of hybrid culture, woven into the fabric of their identity alongside ancient Viridian wisdom. On his 100th birthday on Viridia, celebrated with appropriate fanfare for one of the founding fathers of the hybrid civilization, Jake found himself surrounded by hundreds of descendants, each carrying his DNA forward into the future. Ariel Lynn, now a leader in the hybrid government and mother to 5 children of her own, stood beside him as he addressed the gathering. A long time ago, Jake began, his voice still strong despite his years. I was just a cowboy who got unlucky enough to catch an arrow. I thought my life was over. In a way, it was. But what I found on the other side of death was a second chance at life with purpose beyond anything I could have imagined. You all are that purpose, made flesh. Every one of you represents hope, transformation, and the incredible things that can happen when 2 different peoples choose to build something together rather than remain apart. He looked out at the sea of faces, human features mixed with viridian, skin showing every shade from pure human pigmentation to full viridian iridescence and everything in between. These were his people now, this hybrid civilization that was neither Earth nor Viridia, but something transcendent of both. I don't know what the future holds, Jake continued, but I know it's in good hands. Your hands. You bridge children have already accomplished more than I ever dreamed possible. You've saved a dying civilization, enhanced humanity's legacy among the stars, and created something entirely new in the universe. Whatever comes next, I know you will face it with the courage of your human ancestors and the wisdom of your Viridian forebears. As the celebration continued into the night, Jake found a quiet moment alone with Lyra, who had remained his primary partner and closest companion through all the years. They had grown old together, though age looked different on a Viridian. Her colors had deepened and her features had softened, but she was still beautiful to him. Do you ever regret it? Lyra asked quietly. Leaving Earth, even in death? Taking on this impossible burden? Jake thought about the question seriously before answering. He thought about the life he'd left behind, simple and short though it had been. He thought about Sarah McKinney and wondered what kind of life she'd lived. He thought about the graves on the Kansas plains that probably didn't even have markers anymore. Not for a second, Jake said honestly. That cowboy who died on the trail had lived his life, and it was over. But Jake Thornton, father of the Bridge children, builder of a new civilization, his life has meaning that echoes across the stars. How could I regret that? Lyra leaned against him, and they watched together as their descendants danced and celebrated, human and Viridian moving together in patterns that honor both cultures. The music playing was a fusion composition, human instruments blending with Viridian harmonic technology to create something that stirred the soul regardless of which world had birthed it. This was Jake's legacy, not just the children he'd fathered, but the bridge he'd helped build between 2 civilizations. He'd been chosen at random, plucked from death by alien technology, given an impossible mission. But he'd exceeded every expectation, not through any special talent or ability, but through simple human determination and the willingness to try. As the twin suns began to rise on another day on Viridia, painting the purple sky in shades of crimson and gold, Jake Thornton, cowboy and father of a new civilization, smiled. He'd come a long way from those Kansas plains, farther than any human of his era could have imagined. But he'd found his place here among the stars, and he built something that would last long after he was gone. The bridge between worlds stood strong, built on love and sacrifice and the courage to embrace the strange and unknown. And somewhere on Earth now over a century past the moment of his death, humanity continued its own journey toward the stars, unaware that one of their own had already paved the way for a future where humans and aliens would not be strangers but family. Jake closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of Viridia's suns on his face, listening to the laughter of his descendants, and knew with certainty that every moment of strangeness, every challenge overcome, every bridge built had been worth it. He had lived 2 lives, one simple and short, the other extraordinary and meaningful beyond measure. And if given the choice again, he would make the same decision without hesitation. Because this, all of this, was what life was meant to be. Connection across impossible distances. love that transcended species, and the building of futures that honored the past while embracing the unknown. The cowboy had become the bridge, and the bridge had become eternal.